The series starts in the busy city of Atlanta, where Clarice Fong, a mutant who just escaped from prison, is running away from the police. She ends up in a dead-end alley and seems trapped, but she uses her powers to open a portal and escape to a safe place. Soon after, John Proudstar and his team find the alley. Using his special senses, John tracks down Clarice. Mar, Lorna Dane, and others find Clarice's hideout and kindly invite her to join their hidden mutant community. Their meeting is interrupted when the police surround the building and start shooting. Lorna fights back by crashing police cars with her magnetic powers, while Marcos Diaz uses his light powers to blind the officers. During the chaos, Marcos gets hurt by a stray bullet, making Lorna angry. She confronts the police, but is captured, forcing her friends to run away. The next morning, we meet Andy Strucker, a quiet teenager who faces bullying at school. His parents, Ray and Katie Inn, talk to the school principal about the bullying, with District Attorney Rid threatening to sue the school unless the bullies are punished. Rid is tough with the school, but tries a gentler approach with Lorna, offering a deal if she gives up information about the mutants. Lorna refuses, even when Rid reveals that she is pregnant to pressure her. Meanwhile, Andy reluctantly goes with his sister Lauren to the school dance. While Lauren enjoys her time with her boyfriend, Andy is attacked by bullies in the school showers. His fear triggers his mutant powers, causing a huge shockwave throughout the school. Lauren, who has her own power to create protective shields, is the only one able to calm him down. When they get home, Andy and Lauren tell their mother about their mutant powers, complicating things because their dad's job is to catch mutants. At the same time, in the underground mutant community, Marcos suggests a risky plan to rescue Lorna. He explains that with the government's hunt for mutants getting worse, they can't count on help from the X-Men or Magneto's Brotherhood, as both have gone silent. At the Strucker home, things get worse when Agent Jace Turner and his team confront the family, pushing Caitlin down. Seeing their mom fall, the siblings use their powers to defend themselves and run away. Once they are safe, Caitlin tells her husband about their children's powers. Knowing that Sentinel Services is involved, Rid tells them to flee and asks Marcos for help to get them across the border, promising to help rescue Lorna in return. Marcos heads to the meeting spot and meets an older man he knows. But agents ambush them, and John and Clarice arrive just in time to help, creating a portal to escape. As they run, Sentinel Services sends anti-mutant robots after them. Stuck, Clarice opens a portal to their base, but Rid gets hit by a projectile as the rest escape. Clarice is hurt from using her powers too much, so saving Rid has to wait. Caitlin, the group's only nurse, sees how serious Clarice's injuries are. In pain, Clarice accidentally opens a portal to a busy highway, putting civilians at risk and exposing their hideout. As things worsen, Marcos and Caitlin go out to get medical supplies, while Lauren struggles to close the portals, which is harder as Clarice's condition gets worse. In prison, Lorna is taunted by other inmates, making her angry. When she tries to use her powers, a shock collar stops her, making her feel helpless. She tries to talk to another prisoner for help, but is rejected, leaving her alone and in danger. Meanwhile, Jace questions Rid, pushing him to reveal details about the mutant underground. Rid tries to assert his rights as a district attorney, but Jace coldly reminds him of Sentinel Services' power. At a hospital still treating mutants, Marcos uses his untreated gunshot wound to skip the line. Caitlin, pretending to be a nurse, manages to get the medicine they need. They are nearly caught by the police, but Marcos uses his powers to stop them. Back in prison, Lorna faces violent attacks from anti-mutant inmates. Even though she's pregnant, she fights back, briefly overpowering her collar. At their base, Lauren has trouble keeping the portals closed, so they decide to strengthen their defenses against incoming soldiers. Amid the chaos, Marcos and Caitlin return with the medical supplies. Caitlin rushes inside to give Clarice the medicine, stabilizing her. Seeing that Sentinel Services is threatening to arrest his mother, Helen, for helping mutants in the past, Rid gives in and agrees to cooperate if his family is protected. After Clarice recovers, Marcos suggests using her portal powers to break Lorna out of jail. However, John warns that Clarice still struggles to control her abilities. He proposes training her, but her powers haven't worked since the last incident. John explains that many mutants have trouble controlling their powers at first, but they can learn through positive emotions. Sonia offers to help Clarice by giving her happy memories, but John rejects the idea, worried it could cause problems later. Caitlin disagrees with the plan to attack the prison, so she quietly leaves with her children, looking for a safer option. She goes to her brother Daniel's house, hoping he can use his political influence to help free Lorna. But Daniel refuses to get involved because of the risks, though he agrees to let them stay the night. Meanwhile, Jace orders Rid to set up a meeting with Faith, a mutant who had seen his earlier meeting with Marcos. Faith is cautious at first, but Rid convinces him that he's also running from agents and wants to be with his family. Trusting him, Faith agrees to guide Rid to the headquarters. On their way, Rid is moved by seeing a mutant mother and her daughter, which leads him to confess that Sentinel Services is after him. Using his powers, he jumps onto the highway, and Faith makes their car invisible just in time to escape the chasing agents. The next day, John and Marcos arrive at Daniel's home to relocate the Strucker family because staying there is now dangerous for the mutant community. However, it's already too late. Neighbors have discovered their location and armed themselves, seeing the mutants as invaders. Daniel tries to talk them down, but the neighbors demand to break in. In a tense moment, Andy uses his powers to scare them, escalating the situation until John steps in. The group is forced to flee in Daniel's truck, with the neighbors chasing closely behind. Hearing what happened, Sonia feels for Clarice and decides to implant a happy memory in her mind, making her believe John is her partner. This motivates Clarice, and she successfully opens a portal, bringing everyone back to the safety of their headquarters. John soon realizes that Sonia's actions have changed Clarice's behavior. A flashback reveals a mission from 2 years ago involving John and his friend Pulse, a mutant who could disable electrical systems and stop other mutants' powers. They were trying to free prisoners from a Sentinel Services facility known for making mutants disappear. Despite the strong defenses, Pulse shuts down the turrets to protect his team, but is sadly shot during the mission. Currently, both Rid and Lorna are being moved to a relocation center. The underground mutants find out through Daniel and quickly plan a rescue to stop them from disappearing. Marcos contacts a Colombian cartel he used to work with, now led by his ex-girlfriend, Carmen Guerra. She forces him to torture a man in exchange for the information about the transfer route, leaving Marcos upset when he returns. At the same time, Clarice has romantic dreams about John, though he keeps his distance in real life. When it's time, the mutants try to stop the Sentinel Services convoy that is transporting Rid and Lorna. The Strucker siblings use their powers to stop the bus, but an unknown force stops them from rescuing the prisoners. John realizes that Pulse, who was thought to be dead but is now working for Sentinel Services, is causing the disruption. John confronts and disables Pulse. As soon as Lorna feels her powers return, Rid tells her to use the metal pins in his knee to help them break out. They manage to escape successfully. Jace looks back on the failed mission and remembers July 15th, for years ago, when he was just a regular police officer in Dallas and a happy father. His life changed forever during a family outing when a nearby pro-mutant protest turned violent, resulting in an energy explosion that killed his daughter. Back at the mutant base, Rid is reunited with his children, but their happiness is short-lived when Faith recognizes him as a former ally of Sentinel Services, causing distrust among the mutants. Despite the shock, Caitlin and the kids support Rid. He admits his past mistakes and promises to make things right by offering to distract the Sentinel agents away from the base. Meanwhile, Marcos and Lorna have a sweet moment as they talk about their future child. When Marcos touches her belly, it causes a glowing light, showing their baby's special abilities. Later, Lorna runs into Jace's squad on the highway and confronts the agents fiercely, wanting them to feel what she has been through. Marcos is hesitant, but Lorna convinces him that questioning Jace is important to find out how Pulse was controlled. They call Sonia, who arrives quickly through a portal made by Clarice. Meanwhile, Faith and Rid carry out their plan in the city, with Rid purposely showing himself on surveillance cameras to draw law enforcement away from the Mutants' base. The plan works, but Rid finds himself in urgent need of an escape route. Rid finds Faith's invisible car just in time and narrowly escapes capture. At Lorna's location, Sonya reads Jace's mind and learns about the program that turned Pulse against them. Meanwhile, Lorna fights off soldiers using metal objects, but the soldiers use tear gas, forcing the mutants to retreat. Sonya's questioning is cut short, leaving Jace believing his daughter is still alive. Because of his sacrifice, Rid slowly earns the trust of the mutant community. At the same time, the Strucker family rethinks their plan to escape to Mexico and decides to stay and support the mutants. Nearby, Clarice confronts Sonya after seeing her change people's memories, realizing that's why she had been having strange dreams. Sonya argues that she was only trying to help Clarice control her powers, but Clarice rejects her and wants nothing to do with her. After a tough day, Jace goes home seeking comfort in memories of his daughter, only to be reminded by his wife that he still has to face his grief. The next morning, John and Marcos plan to break into a federal facility to find information about how Pulse was turned by Sentinel Services. They need Clarice's help, but she refuses, upset with John for not telling her about Sonya's actions. Feeling used for her powers, Clarice leaves the base. With Clarice gone, Andy volunteers to join the mission, even though his father is worried. Meanwhile, Jace, though on leave due to his loss, is eager to get back to work. To tighten the pressure on the mutants, Jace teams up with Dr. Campbell, a scientist who is very interested in the Strucker siblings. On the way to the facility, Rid tries to connect with Andy by asking him what it feels like to use his powers. Andy admits that causing destruction feels exciting, which worries Rid as he fears Andy might hurt someone unintentionally. At the facility, Andy uses his powers to break in, allowing Rid and Marcos to get the information they need. On their way back, they notice unmarked police cars following them, indicating an ambush. John warns them in time, and Lorna arrives with Lauren and Wes, who have been training with her. As they approach a police blockade, Lauren creates a ramp with her powers, launching their truck over the barrier while Lorna uses her abilities to shield them from gunfire. At the same time, Wes uses his illusions to create multiple images of their truck, confusing the police. Back at the base, John examines the stolen files and discovers that Pulse isn't the only mutant controlled by Sentinel Services. Elsewhere, Campbell suggests to Jace the idea of using controlled mutants, called Hounds, to secretly attack the mutant headquarters. However, this plan faces legal issues from a Justice Department official who says it's illegal, but the official suddenly collapses from a stroke caused by one of Campbell's hounds. In another place, John finds Clarice, who has isolated herself, and begs her to come back, explaining that the community needs her. But Clarice is focused on finding the highway connected to a portal she opened accidentally. Hearing her troubles, John promises to help and assist Clarice in tracing the portal back to the mutant orphanage where she grew up, a safe place for mutants who couldn't fit into society. Sadly, they find it destroyed by a recent Sentinel Services raid, and no one survived. Feeling guilty and blaming herself for possibly leading the agents there, Clarice decides to return to the mutant base to make things right. Meanwhile, Lorna becomes suspicious of Marcos' long absences and learns that he hasn't been collecting supplies as he said. Instead, he's been dealing with Carmen, who offers him a new job, saying it will help their community. Doubting Marcos' story, Lorna sneaks into Carmen's estate, knocking out a guard. Sonya reads the guard's mind and finds where Marcos is. They see him working for Carmen, disrupting a rival cartel's drug operation. Furious at Marcos' dishonesty, Lorna confronts him back at the base about his secretive behavior. During this heated moment, Rid discovers from the stolen data that Wes, one of their allies, was forced into crime after his parents abandoned him. Feeling ashamed of his past, Wes decides to leave the group, ending his budding relationship with Lauren. Further investigation of the data reveals that Trask Industries was involved in experimenting on innocent people, a project once run by Rid's father, Otto, who didn't know about his grandchildren. With Otto's troubled history as a father, Rid considers the difficult choice of reconnecting with him. Meanwhile, on a mission to rescue refugees. John's team saves Esme Frost, a telepath who senses a hound hiding among them. The disguised hound attacks, forcing John, Marcos, and Clarice to work together to stop her. They capture the hound, but she's too quick for Sonya to read her mind. Lorna tries to scare her with floating knives, but Marcos stops her, insisting on a gentler approach. This incident reignites old arguments about Marcos' involvement with the cartel. However, his past experience helps him recognize the signs of addiction in the hound. With help from Caitlin and her kids, they sedate the hound, hoping to get more information without more violence. After waking up, they question the prisoner about her past, but she cannot speak. Esme reads her mind and discovers that she was tortured at Trask Industries and was addicted to a mutant drug called Kick. Sadly, the prisoner dies from her condition. Elsewhere, John goes with Rid to visit his estranged father, Otto. At first, Otto is reluctant, but he softens when he learns that his grandchildren are being targeted because they are mutants. Otto reveals a shocking family secret. His father was Andreas von Strucker, part of the mutant terrorist duo Fenris with his sister, Andrea. Andy and Lauren's powers are similar to those of Fenris. Otto, who also has powers, distanced himself from his family legacy by working at Trask Industries on a project to suppress the mutant gene. Although he never managed to create a cure for all mutants, he did make a one-time treatment for Rid to stop his powers, which Rid had mistaken for a serious illness when he was young. Otto feels guilty and regrets that his efforts didn't stop the mutant gene in his grandchildren. Andy and Lauren inherit the powerful abilities of the Von Struckers, and they could be dangerous if they combine their powers. Their talk is interrupted when Campbell's forces arrive with Pulse. In a selfless act, Otto decides to confront them, giving Rid and John a chance to escape. Otto tells Rid to protect the world from the potential threat of his children. Using his last bit of strength, Otto blocks Pulse's powers, causing an explosion that kills both of them. John and Rid mourn the loss of two important figures in their lives. Meanwhile, Esme learns from the prisoner's memories that her own family is suffering in a Trask Industries facility known for its harsh treatment of mutants. Although she's hesitant to lead a risky attack, Esme uses her telepathy to subtly influence her allies into supporting her rescue plan. At the same time, Jace, seeing how badly Campbell was hurt in the explosion, prepares for the mutants to attack the lab soon. He secretly organizes a response team, making sure everything they do follows official procedures. Learning about their family's dark past, Andy and Lauren cautiously hold hands to test their combined powers. At first, nothing happens, but as they concentrate, they almost destroy the base before Rid steps in. Realizing how dangerous their powers can be, John's team decides to use them to cut off the power at the Trask lab. Sonya, along with Andy and Lauren, enters the substation through a portal created by Clarice, while John, Marcos, Lorna, and Esme get ready to attack the lab when the time is right. Jace learns that the mutants plan to attack the power plant first, so he sends his new team there. Sonya's powers help clear the guards initially, but they are caught off guard by Sentinel Services agents and their robots. In the chaos, Clarice is captured while trying to help Andy and Lauren escape, causing John's team to fail and forcing them to retreat with Esme. At the power plant, Sonya hides Andy and Lauren in the basement, but she is also caught. With no other option, the siblings get ready to destroy the facility. However, Andy hesitates, realizing that doing so could cost many lives, confirming his grandfather's fears. Refusing to follow in Fenris's footsteps, they decide to surrender to Sentinel Services, much to the disappointment of their parents, who are watching from afar. Back at their base, Lorna pushes for a direct fight against Sentinel Services, but Rid and Caitlin suggest a peaceful approach, trying to get help from Rid's old government contacts. During their argument, Esme convinces them to negotiate with Jace, saying that a deal can be made. After they leave, Esme tells the other mutants about the plan, but leaves out her own role in it. This news causes a split among the mutants, with some wanting to attack and others wanting to avoid more conflict with Sentinel Services. Meanwhile, Jace, unable to get any information from the mutants, hands them over to Campbell at Trask Industries, where they are forced to test their powers against an adamantium barrier. a nearly unbreakable metal linked to Wolverine. When they refuse, Campbell kills Sonya as a warning and threatens Clarice next. With no other choice, Andy and Lauren combine their powers and manage to break through the adamantium. Meanwhile, Rid and Caitlin confront Jace at his home, bringing a gun for protection. They tell him about the abuses of the Hound program and the use of the drug kick, but Jace still refuses to help. After they leave, Jace's wife steps in, challenging his actions and reminding him of how they affect their daughter's memory. This makes Jace rethink his decisions, and he decides to help the mutants in captivity. John receives information about the prisoners' transfer and sees it as a chance to rescue them. Marcos and Esme are sent to intercept the transport, but Esme betrays Marcos, using a taser on him and turning the guards against each other with her powers. Jace, who is ignored by Esme, survives the fight. In the confusion, Esme manages to free the mutants, including her twin sisters, Phoebe Cuckoo and Sophie Frost, who share her telepathic abilities. The next day, the Frost sisters meet William, a member of the Hellfire Club, a secret group that used to control global events but has lost its power. They now want to use underground mutants to regain their influence. At the same time, the underground mutants gather for Sonya's funeral, and Jace mourns his assistant, who was killed by the Frost sisters. Campbell, meanwhile, uses the tragedy to gain public support for expanding the Hound program, which is based on experiments done on the Stroker siblings. Facing this growing threat, Rid and Caitlin decide to move their family to Mexico to keep them safe. The Frost sisters suddenly arrive at the underground headquarters, offering to help destroy the Hound program. John and his team refuse their offer because of the sisters' recent violent actions. Lauren starts to agree with the idea of fleeing to Mexico, fearing what the sisters might do to her and her brother. He reluctantly agrees. On their way to the border, the family stops at a mutant shelter where they meet Wes. During their stay, Andy meets one of the Frost sisters, who notices his fighting spirit and quietly tries to persuade him to stay with the group. At the same time, another sister secretly meets Lorna, telling her they need her help because of her father's history with the Hellfire Club. Lorna supports the sisters' extreme tactics, while Marcos argues for the X-Men's values of using power wisely, not for control. Soon after, Sentinel Services attacks the shelter where the Strokers are staying, sending Hounds with combined powers to cause chaos. West tries to hide everyone, but the powerful Hounds destroy the refuge. In the midst of the battle, John's team steps in, but struggles against the Hounds. A mysterious voice guides them to safety, and they realize it was the Frost sisters helping them. With the Hound threat growing, the mutants reluctantly accept the sisters' help, not knowing that they plan to rebuild the Hellfire Club. The sisters then inform the group about an important conference led by Campbell, where they see an opportunity to capture him and stop the Hound program. When the Strokers return to headquarters, Lauren finds Andy reading about the Von Struckers. Andy believes their ancestors were not just terrorists but also visionaries who wanted a safe place for mutants. Lauren disagrees but keeps his views to herself. Meanwhile, Rid learns that Sentinel Services is investigating his father's research and tracking his mother, Helen. Worried for her safety, the family sets out to find Helen before the agents do. At a secret location, Esme gathers John's team and explains their past, revealing that while the X-Men once guided the underground mutants, the Brotherhood later turned into the Hellfire Club and then vanished. Though uneasy with this news, the underground group understands they must keep working together. At Helen's office, Rid and Caitlin warn her about the threat from Sentinel Services and urge her to hide. Meanwhile, Andy and Lauren stand guard outside, debating how much force they should use in their fight. When agents arrive, Andy responds aggressively, forcing Lauren to step in to prevent things from getting deadly. The siblings set aside their argument when they reunite with their parents. Before leaving for a safer place, Helen tells them about Otto's partner, Madeline Rissman, and regrets not taking Rid's childhood illness seriously. At the conference setup, Campbell convinces Senator Montez to support his anti-mutant plan. John's team tries to confront Campbell, using a portal from Clarice, but he uses children as shields, forcing them to back off as Sentinel Services closes in. A flashback shows Lorna's troubled past, locked in a psychiatric hospital for her involvement in a violent protest and her bipolar disorder. Her boring routine is broken when Evangeline Whedon, a lawyer and fellow mutant, invites her to join the underground resistance. In the present, the failed attempt to catch Campbell leaves John's team empty-handed as Campbell urges Senator Montez to push the Hound program in Washington. Lorna struggles with her fears of raising her child in a hostile world, hiding her distress from Marcos, though her eyes reveal her anger. Esme senses Lorna's turmoil and hints that she should embrace her father's legacy, Magneto, without directly naming him. Meanwhile, Andy becomes more resentful, seeing all humans as enemies, but his parents remind him they are human too. Frustrated, Andy storms out of the room. Outside Helen's office, Jace uses mutants who have switched sides to track down the Stroker family. They reach the edge of the underground base, which is falsely labeled as a contaminated nuclear site, a lie that Jace quickly uncovers. A mutant guarding the base releases a wave of fear, temporarily stopping the soldiers, but Jace pushes his team to keep going. The underground mutants begin an urgent evacuation. Meanwhile, at the safe house, Marcos discovers Lorna is gone, and John confirms that she left with two of the Frost sisters. Esme, the only sister who stayed behind, tells John's group that her sisters have gone to stop Campbell and Montez on their plane. Instead of being pleased, John and his team get angry, warning that harming humans could make things worse for mutants. Back at the base, as women and children are being evacuated with limited transport, Rid takes charge of the defense while Caitlin works to open an escape route through the vault. The Stroker siblings fend off the first wave of agents, but a second attack, led by Hounds, causes chaos in the headquarters. As the danger grows, the mutants manage to open the tunnel in the vault and start escaping. However, Andy and Lauren decide to stay behind, using their combined powers to make a final stand that destroys the building. Meanwhile, John's team confronts Lorna, who fights them off to complete her mission. Marcos, heartbroken, accuses her of risking their child's future, but she insists they need to create a new world. Determined, Lorna uses her powers to crash Campbell and Montez's plane and then escapes. After these events, Jace is blamed for everything. Feeling betrayed and not wanting to take the fall, he quits his job. The remaining underground mutants later regroup in Nashville to decide their next steps. It's there that Lorna and Esme arrive, now recruiting for the Hellfire Club, which plans not just to protect mutants but to actively fight humans. Inspired by their mission, some mutants, including Andy, decide to join them. Lauren tries to stop Andy, reminding him of their childhood when they pretended to be X-Men, heroes who save the world. Unmoved, Andy calls the X-Men outdated and pushes his family away, leaving with the sisters. This dramatic moment ends the first season of the series. So the moral of the story is when life gives you mutant powers, runaway convicts, and evil government agents, just remember, sometimes saving the world means creating portals, breaking out of jail, and definitely not trusting your siblings to keep their hands to themselves, or you might end up blowing up a building again.